Hello and welcome to another episode of NewsX Deepdive with me, Vineet Malhotra, where today we turn our attention to a shocking development that has triggered global outrage. A move that takes Afghanistan deeper into what is being called a woman's right crisis. The Taliban regime in Afghanistan has introduced sweeping new family laws governing marriages, divorce and child marriage, drawing widespread criticism and concern from international observers. The 31-article regulation titled Principles of Separation Between Spouses has been approved by Taliban Supreme Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada and published in the regime's official gazette in mid-May, according to local Afghan reports. While the document covers and outlines rules regarding child marriage, missing husbands, forced separation, apostasy, accusations of adultery and other religious and legal matters, one line in particular has horrified the world. One of the most controversial provisions states that the silence of a virgin girl after reaching puberty may be interpreted as consent to marriage. Let's hear that again. The silence of a virgin girl having merely reached puberty can be treated as consent. A child who says nothing or is unable to say anything can legally be considered to have agreed. But that's not all. The regulation goes on to say that silence by a boy or a previously married woman, however, will not automatically count as consent. Critics argue that in deeply patriarchal societies, especially under Taliban rule, silence may not mean agreement. It may mean fear, pressure, or simply the inability to refuse. And this is why international outrage is growing. But critics argue that in deeply patriarchal societies, especially under Taliban rule, this is being done out of fear or pressure. But critics continue to argue that this is a problem which is obviously pertaining to only Taliban. So with the Taliban institutionalizing child marriage, we ask, what does this mean for millions of girls trapped under Taliban rule in Afghanistan? The Taliban has not merely tolerated child marriage, it has now effectively codified it. Although the provision of Khiyar al-Bulugh says a minor married by a guardian may later choose to ratify or reject the marriage after puberty, rights groups say that argument collapses in reality, because how does a child raised under coercion inside an authoritarian system with no independent judiciary and no rights protection truly exercise consent? That is the core question. The crisis predates the Taliban's return, but experts say it has dramatically worsened since 2021. Afghanistan already had one of the world's highest rates of child marriage, and according to advocacy groups, nearly one-third of Afghan girls are married before the age of 18. And after the Taliban takeover in August 2021, the numbers reportedly surged. Just take a look at the numbers now. Up to 50% of Afghan girls are married before the age of 19, with the most common marriage age being 15 and 16. Roughly 10% of girls are married before the age of 15 as of 2023. Child marriage rates are significantly higher in rural areas and vary heavily by province. There are major drivers to this trend. Number one, poverty. Families devastated by economic burden are marrying off daughters to survive. Reports suggest girls and in some horrifying cases infants have been exchanged for money to pay debts or secure food. The reported bride price ranges from hundreds of thousands of dollars. For desperate families, daughters become economic bargaining chips. Secondly, education bans. In a deeply patriarchal society, when girls are banned from schools, marriage becomes the default future. The Taliban barred girls from secondary education after retaking power. Since then, international organizations have repeatedly warned that denying girls education fuels forced and early marriages. A 2025 analysis in a medical journal warned that Taliban restrictions were increasing girls' vulnerability to child marriage, adolescent pregnancy, maternal mortality, and gender-based violence. Moreover, female participation in the workforce is heavily restricted and has plummeted due to strict limitations in places across public life. Think about that. No school, no employment, no freedom of movement. Marriage becomes the only socially acceptable path left. Lastly, there are also reports that some families marry off daughters out of fear. Fear of instability, fear of Taliban fighters, and fear of social insecurity. Under such conditions, the idea of choice becomes almost meaningless. Before the Taliban takeover, Afghanistan technically had minimum marriage age protections. Under the earlier Afghan civil code, girls generally had to be at least 16 and boys 18 years for marriage. Well, there were still loopholes and enforcement problems, and child marriage remained widespread, but there was at least a legal framework against it. Now, critics say those protections have effectively collapsed under Taliban rule. The former legal system has largely been replaced by Taliban edicts based on their interpretation of Sharia. And this is crucial. Many Islamic scholars themselves dispute the Taliban's interpretation. Several Muslim commentators and rights advocates argue that forced marriage and coercion violate core Islamic principles of consent and dignity. The United Nations and rights groups have repeatedly warned that Afghan women are facing one of the world's most severe human rights crises. Some activists now openly use the term gender apartheid. Yet, despite global outrage, the Taliban continues engaging diplomatically with parts of the world. In fact, even as rights concerns grow, reports indicate some countries and blocs are still exploring talks with Taliban officials over regional issues. The contradiction is becoming increasingly difficult for the international community to explain. And what happens to a generation of Afghan girls growing up with no classrooms, no careers, no legal autonomy, and now potentially no meaningful right to refuse marriage? Because this is not just about Afghanistan anymore. This has become a global human rights test. Can the world continue engaging with the Taliban while women's freedoms are systematically dismantled? Or does silence from the international community risk normalizing these policies? Tonight, Afghanistan's girls are at the center of that question. And for many of them, the future is being decided before they are even old enough to understand what freedom means, and their voice silenced not just metaphorically but under codified law. Tahira Hassan, social activist, with us on the program. Tahira ji, well, as is the situation for women in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan was not bad enough that they had to make it worse by putting out this dictum against marriage and marriageable age. Obviously, all countries that do business with Taliban today are going to be in some sort of a spotlight. This is obviously including India. This is also including a lot of other countries in Asia and across the world that want to support Taliban but are not completely careful or are partially reluctant because of the human rights violations. What are your thoughts on this, ma'am?
Yeah, of course, that I think the whole world should raise the voice against this Taliban regime. What they are doing, they have just passed the family law, in this law is the most disturbing is this thing that the girls, the virgin girls, silence, if he does not refuses for the marriage, will be taken, considered as consent. So, in the Taliban regime, authoritarian regime, can you imagine that any girl will stand up and say, no, I want to go for the education. I don't want to get married, because there's no education for the girls, no health care, any system, no employment, no other way for them to get out of this kind of life. The only marriage that has been, they can go for that. And mostly what happens, this is more dangerous, I'm saying, because when the girls are not able to raise their voice against it, and their parents also, poverty is also very vital role that is playing there, then what happens? This will increase forced marriages of these young girls. And what happens when these young girls will get married, their body, man, we have to think in that way also, that how much it is going to destroy not only one girl or 1,000 girls, but whole society, because the body is not biologically ready, not their mental development is proper has taken place. So what happens when they will get married without education, and there is no health care for them? They will get pregnant, and after that they will face a lot of risk in pregnancy. And often we see that in Taliban, I have read so many articles that in childbirth these young girls, death comes. We witness the death of these young girls, and the malnourished children come in this world. So whole society, they are destroying these Taliban. They are violating human right. They are violating women's right. So I think they are not only I will say that this is only patriarchal society, but I think they are very cruel also. They are no human. They don't have any this thing to believe in human rights. They don't believe in human rights. And one more thing I want to say: the Taliban, whatever are doing, is not Islamic at all. If it is Islamic, then why the nikah is there, where the girl's consent is taken place? Where her consent, I mean, this is not that she can say no also. She can say yes also. And the coming out of the marriage, they have made it so difficult. Divorce has been made so difficult. So they treat the woman as a commodity. The small, I will say the girl who is not mature enough to go for this marriage. I mean, she wants to study. I mean, no access of education, no access of health care. So I think that we all should raise the voice. It is just violating not only human rights, but women rights also.
Tairaji, appreciate your thoughts and always a pleasure having you on my show. Thank you so much, ma'am. We'll take a short break now. Be right back.